The Declaration. The stellar assembly hall had witnessed countless historic moments across its 3-century existence, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold. The massive chamber floated in the heart of Station Zenith 7, a diplomatic outpost positioned perfectly between 5 major star systems. Its walls were constructed from crystalline compounds that shifted colors based on the emotional states of those present, and today they pulsed with deep reds and oranges, reflecting the anger and frustration that filled the room. 52 civilizations had sent their most important representatives to this emergency session. The chamber was designed to accommodate them all, with gravity-adjusted platforms floating at various heights and environmental controls that created perfect conditions for each species. The Krillian delegates sat in their water-filled spheres on the upper levels, their tentacles moving in agitated patterns. The Thoraxian warriors occupied the middle tier, their crystalline exoskeletons gleaming under the ambient light. The Velmari floated in their containment fields, pure energy beings that communicated through carefully modulated radiation pulses. At the center podium stood Supreme Chancellor Vexthor, a member of the Saurian Dominion. His species had been among the first to achieve interstellar travel, and their natural longevity meant Vexthor had served in diplomatic positions for over 200 years. His scaled skin was deep emerald, and his vertical pupils contracted as he surveyed the assembly. He raised one clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent. "We convene today to address a matter that can no longer be ignored," Vexthor began, his voice amplified through the translation matrix that converted his words into formats each species could understand. "For 87 years, humanity has been a recognized species within our galactic community. For 87 years, they have rejected every reasonable request we have made." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Commander Zalrin of the Korthan Collective leaned forward in his seat, his 4 arms crossed in a gesture that signaled displeasure among his kind. The Korthan were the military backbone of the Council, a warrior species that had conquered 17 systems before joining the Greater Alliance. Zalrin had personally overseen 12 successful campaigns against species that refused to comply with Council authority. "They maintain what they call the Forbidden Sector," Vexthor continued, his tail swishing behind him in agitation. "A region of space containing 7 star systems and 15 colony worlds. No Council inspector has ever been permitted entry. No scanning vessel has been allowed to approach. When we send diplomatic missions, they are offered refreshments and politely turned away." High Magistrate Curran pulsed with blue-white light from her containment field. Her voice emerged from speakers as pure, melodic tones. "The humans claim they desire peace, yet they refuse transparency. They participate in trade negotiations but decline to share their defensive capabilities. They smile and nod during our meetings, then return to their sealed borders as if we do not exist." Another representative stood, this one from the Nexari hive mind. The Nexari spoke with 1,000 voices at once, creating an eerie chorus. "We have been patient. We have been generous. We have extended every courtesy to this young species. They respond with secrecy and suspicion. Such behavior cannot be tolerated. It undermines the very foundation of our alliance." Vexthor nodded slowly, his expression grave. "The Council Intelligence Bureau has prepared a report on humanity's military capabilities. Based on our observations of their border patrols and the limited engagements we have witnessed, we estimate they possess perhaps 40,000 combat-capable vessels. Their technology appears to be approximately 3 generations behind our current standard. Their population across 15 worlds totals roughly 45 billion individuals." Commander Zalrin stood, his 4 arms spreading wide in a gesture of confidence. "The combined forces of the Council number more than 1.2 million warships. Our technology represents the accumulated knowledge of 52 advanced civilizations. Our experience spans thousands of years of warfare and peacekeeping. The humans are children playing with toys they barely understand." The assembly erupted in voices of agreement. Species that had rarely aligned on any issue found common ground in their frustration with humanity's stubborn independence. The Krillians waved their tentacles in approval. The Thoraxians struck their armored chests in a rhythmic display of martial enthusiasm. Even the typically cautious Velmari pulsed with waves of supporting energy. Vexthor raised his hand again, calling for silence. Therefore, after careful deliberation and with the support of all member civilizations, the Stellar Council formally declares a state of war against humanity. We will give them one final opportunity to open their borders, submit to inspection, and comply with Council authority. If they refuse, we will enforce compliance through military action. The chamber filled with the sounds of approval, each species expressing agreement in their own way. The decision was unanimous. The greatest military force in known galactic history would be brought to bear against one stubborn, secretive species that had failed to understand its place in the cosmic order. At the far end of the chamber, in a small observation gallery reserved for minor delegates and witnesses, sat a single human. Ambassador Marcus Webb was 58 years old, though he looked older. His hair had gone completely white and deep lines marked his face, the result of a lifetime spent in service to his species. He wore a simple gray suit, the kind a teacher might wear, which was appropriate since he had been a history professor before joining the diplomatic corps. As the declaration of war was announced, Webb did not stand. He did not shout protests or demand to be heard. Instead, he reached into the worn leather bag at his feet and withdrew something that caused several nearby delegates to lean forward in confusion. It was a newspaper. An actual physical newspaper printed on thin paper with black ink, technology so ancient that most species in the chamber had only encountered it in historical archives. Webb unfolded it carefully, the paper crackling softly in the silence that had begun to spread through the chamber as beings noticed what he was doing. He pulled a pair of reading glasses from his pocket, settled them on his nose, and began to read. Vexthor stared at him, his vertical pupils contracting to slits. "Ambassador Webb," he called out, his voice carrying an edge of disbelief. "The Stellar Council has just declared war upon your species. Do you have nothing to say?" Webb glanced up briefly from his newspaper, his expression mildly annoyed, as if he had been interrupted during an interesting article. "Oh, yes, I heard you, Chancellor. War, unity of purpose, enforcement of compliance. Very dramatic." He returned his attention to the newspaper. "The crossword today is particularly challenging. 7 down has me stumped." A shocked silence fell over the assembly. Commander Zalrin rose to his full height, his 4 arms spreading in a gesture of aggressive confrontation. "Human, do you understand the situation? 1.2 million warships. The combined military might of 52 civilizations. Your 15-colony world stand alone against the entire galaxy." Webb turned a page of his newspaper, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet chamber. 45 billion humans, you said? I think your intelligence report is a bit outdated, Commander. We passed 50 billion about 3 years ago. Population growth, you understand. We do enjoy our families. Curran pulsed with confused yellow light. Ambassador, your flippancy is unbecoming. We are offering you one final chance to avoid bloodshed. Open your borders. Submit to our authority. Accept that you cannot stand against us. For the first time, Webb set down his newspaper. He folded it carefully, creased the edges with precise movements, and placed it on the small table beside his seat. Then he stood, moving with the deliberate slowness of someone who had all the time in the world. Chancellor Vexthor, Commander Zalrin, High Magistrate Curran, and honored representatives of the Stellar Council, Webb began, his voice calm and measured. My government anticipated this moment. In fact, we have been expecting it for quite some time. You have made assumptions about humanity based on limited observations and surface-level analysis. This is understandable but unfortunate. He walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing on the crystalline floor. You see us as young, primitive, secretive. You interpret our desire for privacy as weakness or guilt. You believe that because we smile and offer tea instead of submitting to your demands, we must be hiding our inadequacy. Vexthor's tail swished with irritation. Then prove us wrong, Ambassador. Open your borders. Show us what you are hiding. Webb smiled, but there was no warmth in it. My government has given me very specific instructions for this situation. I am to inform you that humanity formally declines your declaration of war. The chamber erupted in confused noise. Multiple species attempted to speak at once, their voices and emissions creating chaos in the translation matrix. You cannot decline a declaration of war. Zalrin shouted over the din, that is not how this works. And yet we do, Webb replied, his voice cutting through the noise with surprising authority. We decline. We do not accept your war. We do not acknowledge your authority over us. You may send your fleets to our borders if you wish. That is your choice. But we will not fight you. We will not negotiate with you under threats. We will simply continue doing what we have always done. Which is what? Curran asked, her emanations shifting to puzzled orange. Webb picked up his newspaper again. Living our lives. Raising our children. Building our cities. Reading our newspapers. Enjoying the peace we worked very hard to achieve. He tucked the paper under his arm. We asked, quite politely, to be left alone. You refused. Now you declare war, and we refuse to participate. He turned and began walking toward the exit. The entire assembly watched him go, too stunned to react. At the chamber doors, Webb paused and looked back over his shoulder. I am also instructed to deliver one warning, he said quietly. If your fleets cross into the forbidden sector, there will be consequences. Not threats. Not negotiations. Consequences. He adjusted his glasses. My government is very specific about the distinction. What kind of consequences? Vexthor demanded, finding his voice at last. Webb considered the question for a moment. The kind that my species spent 250 years hoping we would never need to demonstrate. The kind that we built the forbidden sector to contain. The kind that made us ask, very sincerely, to be left alone. He opened the door. I suggest you research human history before you commit to this course of action, Chancellor. Not the sanitized version we share in cultural exchanges. The real history. The bloody parts. The parts we are not particularly proud of. The parts that explain why we are trying so very hard to be peaceful now. Is that a threat? Zalrin growled. No, Commander. It is an observation from someone who knows what his species is capable of. Webb smiled sadly. We have spent 2.5 centuries learning to be better than we were. Please do not force us to remember what we used to be. He stepped through the door, and it closed behind him with a soft whisper of sound. In the stellar assembly hall, 52 civilizations sat in uncomfortable silence, wondering what they had just witnessed. Vexthor looked down at his data pad, where the intelligence report on humanity glowed with cool blue text. 40,000 ships. Primitive technology. Isolated colonies. The numbers seemed solid, reasonable, backed by years of observation. But something in Ambassador Webb's eyes had suggested those numbers meant nothing at all. Commander Zalrin broke the silence. He was bluffing. Obviously. They are trying to frighten us into backing down. Perhaps, Vexthor said slowly. But for the first time in 200 years of diplomatic service, he felt a cold thread of doubt working its way through his thoughts. In her containment field, Curran pulsed with uncertain purple light. What did he mean about consequences? What could they possibly have that we should fear? No one had an answer. The vote had been cast. The declaration made. The fleets would assemble, and soon they would discover the truth about humanity's forbidden sector. Whatever that truth might be. The reckoning. 3 weeks after the declaration of war, the assembled armada of the Stellar Council hung in the darkness at the edge of human space like a swarm of metallic stars. 1.2 million warships from 52 civilizations stretched across millions of kilometers, their running lights creating an artificial constellation that could be seen from nearby systems. It was the largest military force ever assembled in recorded galactic history, a monument to collective power and unified purpose. Commander Zalrin stood on the bridge of the Eternal Wrath, the flagship of the Corthan fleet. The vessel was 15 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached in 2 centuries of warfare. Around him, officers from a dozen species worked at their stations, monitoring the vast fleet through quantum-linked communication systems. Status report, Zalrin commanded, his 4 arms crossed in a posture of confident authority. A Thraxian tactical officer responded, her crystalline voice chiming through the bridge speakers. All fleet elements report ready status, Commander. Weapons charged. Shields at maximum. Invasion troops standing by. We await your order to advance. Zalrin nodded, his compound eyes reflecting the tactical displays that surrounded him. The human border was marked in red on the holographic map, a clearly defined line that humanity had maintained with surprising consistency for 8 decades. Beyond that line lay the Forbidden Sector, 7 star systems that no Council vessel had ever been permitted to enter. Commander, a voice called from across the bridge. Zalrin turned to see Intelligence Officer HFY approaching. She was a Velmari, her energy form contained within a portable field generator that allowed her to move freely among solid beings. Her emanations were pulsing with agitated yellow and orange patterns. What is it, officer? Zalrin asked, his tone indicating mild annoyance. HFY had been pestering him with concerns for days, ever since the fleet had assembled. Sir, I need to share additional findings from my research into human history. The information we gathered is incomplete, but what I have discovered is deeply concerning. Zalrin gestured with 2 of his arms in dismissal. We have reviewed the intelligence reports. Humanity is a young species with limited military capability. Their largest vessels are barely half the size of our destroyers. They have no allies, no advanced weapons, nothing that poses a credible threat to this fleet. That is not what concerns me, Commander. HFY's emanations shifted to urgent red. What concerns me is what they used to do to each other. She activated a holographic display that materialized between them. Images began to flow through the air, ancient recordings pulled from human historical databases that had been accessed through diplomatic channels and covert intelligence gathering. The first image showed a planet wreathed in smoke and fire. Cities burned across entire continents. Primitive aircraft filled the skies, dropping explosive devices on population centers below. Ground forces clashed in muddy fields, using chemical weapons that poisoned the air and land. This is what humans call the First World War, HFY explained. It occurred approximately 350 years ago. 17 million of their people died in 4 years of conflict. They fought with weapons we would consider laughably primitive, yet they managed to kill each other with horrifying efficiency. The image shifted, showing larger conflicts, more devastating weapons, entire cities reduced to rubble. This is the Second World War. 60 million dead in 6 years. They developed aerial bombardment tactics that could destroy entire urban centers in a single night. They created weapons of chemical and biological horror. And then, toward the end of this conflict, they achieved something remarkable. A new image appeared, one that made several bridge officers stop their work and stare. A massive explosion rose into the sky, a column of fire and smoke shaped like a poisonous mushroom, dwarfing the city below it. Nuclear fission weapons, HFY said quietly. They split the atom and weaponized the resulting energy release. This single device destroyed an entire city and killed over 100,000 people instantly. The residual radiation killed tens of thousands more over the following years. Zalrin stared at the image. His species had nuclear technology, of course. Every spacefaring civilization did. But it took centuries of careful research and development to reach that level. The idea of achieving it during a planetary war, while simultaneously fighting on multiple continents, seemed almost impossible. They used it twice, HFY continued. Then they built thousands more. Bigger ones. More efficient ones. Within 30 years of splitting the atom, they had created weapons that could destroy all life on their planet dozens of times over. They pointed these weapons at each other and lived that way for decades, knowing that any mistake could mean extinction. But they did not use them again, Zalrin observed. They clearly learned restraint. Did they? HFY's emanations flickered with dark purple uncertainty. Or did they simply redirect their capacity for violence toward a different purpose? Commander, these were not peaceful beings who stumbled into conflict. They were a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. War was their natural state. Peace was the aberration. She changed the display again, showing human cities as they appeared now. Gleaming towers of metal and glass. Parks filled with vegetation. Clean streets. Happy populations. This is what they built after they unified 250 years ago. They stopped fighting each other and turned their collective energy toward advancement. Every human receives advanced education. Every colony maintains cutting-edge research facilities. Every settlement has defensive installations that we have never been allowed to inspect. Zalrin turned away from the display. Your point, officer. My point, Commander, is that we are about to attack a species that spent 10 millennia learning how to wage war, then spent 2.5 centuries preparing for the possibility that someone might threaten their hard-won peace. We know nothing about what they have built in that time. We know nothing about what exists in the forbidden sector. And Ambassador Webb was not afraid of us. He was not even concerned. He read a newspaper. He was performing, Zalrin said firmly. Attempting to intimidate us through theatrical displays of confidence. It is a common tactic among inferior forces. Commander, with respect, what if he was not performing? What if he genuinely was not afraid because there is nothing we can do that would make him afraid? Zalrin's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of finality. Then we are about to discover the truth. Helm, prepare to advance. All fleet elements will cross the border in synchronized formation. Communications, send final warning to all human settlements. They have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. The orders flowed through the fleet. 1.2 million warships oriented themselves toward the red line on their tactical maps. Weapon systems hummed with contained energy. Shield generators reached peak output. Across the vast armada, beings from 52 civilizations prepared for what they believed would be a short, decisive conflict. HFY dimmed her emanations to nearly invisible darkness and returned to her station. She had tried to warn them. She had shown them the evidence. Now they would all discover together what humanity had been protecting in their forbidden sector for the past 87 years. The fleet crossed the border in perfect formation, their sensors sweeping ahead for any sign of resistance. The first human outpost they encountered was small, barely large enough to house 50 personnel. It was completely empty, abandoned without any signs of struggle or hasty evacuation. Everything was clean, orderly, as if the inhabitants had simply decided to leave for a while. The second outpost was the same. The third, fourth, and fifth as well. All empty. All pristine. All clearly evacuated in an organized, systematic manner. They flee before us, a Thoraxian officer announced with satisfaction. The war will be over within days. But Zalrin felt that same cold thread of doubt that Vexthor had experienced in the assembly hall. Species facing overwhelming force either fought desperately at their borders or surrendered immediately to minimize casualties. They did not evacuate systematically and leave everything intact. That suggested a level of preparation and planning that did not match the intelligence estimates. The fleet advanced deeper into human space, encountering no resistance. Station after station sat empty, their lights still burning, their systems still operating, but devoid of any personnel. It was like moving through a civilization that had simply stepped away from their homes, intending to return shortly. After 3 days of advancement, they reached the inner boundary of the forbidden sector. Here, finally, they encountered something other than empty stations. A single ship emerged from the darkness ahead. It was small by military standards, perhaps 60 meters in length, with smooth lines and no visible weapons or heavy armor. It looked more like a diplomatic courier than a warship, the kind of vessel a wealthy individual might use for personal travel between systems. The ship broadcast on all frequencies. The voice was female, calm, and carried an accent that the translation matrix identified as originating from humanity's African continent. Attention, Stellar Council Fleet. This is Captain Jennifer Rodriguez of the Human Defense Force, commanding the vessel Messenger. You are approaching the Forbidden Sector. Entry is not permitted. I am authorized to speak on behalf of my government and my species. Zalrin opened a communication channel. Captain Rodriguez, you are in no position to give orders. You command a single unarmed vessel facing 1.2 million warships. Surrender your ship and guide us to your nearest colony world. This war is already over. There was a pause. When Rodriguez spoke again, her voice carried a weight of sadness that seemed genuine. Commander, I am going to give you one warning. This is not a negotiating tactic. This is not a bluff. This is a simple statement of fact from one military officer to another. Speak, then. Turn your fleet around. Leave human space. Return to your worlds. If you do this, we will forgive everything that has happened. No revenge. No retaliation. No consequences. We will return to our borders, and you will return to yours, and we will all pretend this unfortunate situation never occurred. Zalrin looked around his bridge. His officers were smiling, the various species-specific expressions all conveying the same emotion, amusement at the absurd audacity of this tiny ship and its lone captain. And if we refuse? Zalrin asked. Another pause, longer this time. Then I will be forced to demonstrate why we asked to be left alone. And Commander, I truly do not want to do that. I joined the Defense Force because I believe in protecting my people, not because I wanted to hurt others. But I have my orders, and I will follow them if you leave me no choice. Zalrin leaned forward in his command chair. Captain Rodriguez, the Eternal Wrath alone carries more firepower than your entire observed fleet. The vessel you command appears to be completely unarmed. You have 30 seconds to surrender before I order your destruction. Very well, Rodriguez said, and now her voice shifted, becoming formal and cold. Let the record show that I offered the Stellar Council fleet an opportunity to withdraw without conflict. Let the record show that they refused. Activating demonstration protocol. Single target. Non-lethal settings. Target designated, Corthan flagship Eternal Wrath. Nothing happened. Zalrin waited, his compound eyes scanning his tactical displays. The human ship had not moved. No weapons had charged. No energy signatures had changed. Perhaps their demonstration device had malfunctioned. Then the lights went out. Every system on the Eternal Wrath died simultaneously. The engines fell silent. The weapons went cold. The shields collapsed. Life support continued on backup power, but everything else simply ceased to function. 15 kilometers of the most advanced warship the Corthan Collective had ever built became nothing more than a metal shell drifting in space. Zalrin stumbled in the darkness, his 4 arms reaching for support. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting the bridge in dim red illumination. Officers shouted in confusion and alarm. Status displays remained dark. Communication systems were silent. Through the bridge windows, Zalrin could see the rest of the Council fleet, their lights still shining, their ship still powered and functional. Only the Eternal Wrath had been affected. Somehow, from impossible distance, that tiny human ship had reached out and turned off his flagship like someone flipping a switch. Rodriguez's voice returned, now broadcasting through the backup communication systems that had been isolated from the main network. Commander Zalrin, what just happened to your vessel is called a quantum disruption field. We can selectively interfere with the fundamental forces that hold matter together and allow energy to flow. Your ship is intact. Your crew is unharmed. But every system has been temporarily disabled at the quantum level, and nothing you do will restart them. Not for at least 12 hours. Zalrin managed to reach his command chair and pulled himself into it. His mind was racing, trying to understand what he had just experienced. Quantum manipulation at this scale, at this distance, with this precision, should be impossible. It violated every principle of physics he understood. That was our gentlest option, Rodriguez continued. Non-lethal. Reversible. Designed to disable without destroying. We have 1,743 platforms positioned throughout the Forbidden Sector. Each one can do to thousands of ships what I just did to yours. Each one can target independently and simultaneously. The implications crashed through Zalrin's consciousness like a physical blow. 1.2 million ships. 1,700 platforms. The mathematics was simple and terrible. But that is not the worst part, Commander. Rodriguez's voice softened with what sounded like genuine regret. What I just used is our kindest weapon. The one we built for situations where we want to stop aggression without killing anyone. We have other weapons. Weapons that my species developed during our darkest times and improved over 2.5 centuries of unified advancement. Weapons we hope we will never need to use. Weapons we built specifically to ensure that no one would ever threaten our peace. In the darkness of his disabled flagship, Zalrin finally understood what Ambassador Webb had tried to tell them. Humanity had not been hiding weakness behind their borders. They had been hiding mercy. A species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare, that had split atoms while fighting planetary conflicts, that had pointed extinction weapons at themselves and somehow survived, had spent 250 years preparing for this exact scenario. And they had done so with the full resources of a unified civilization that no longer wasted energy fighting itself. You have 48 hours to begin your withdrawal, Rodriguez said. After that time, if your fleet remains in human space, I will receive authorization to escalate. And Commander, you do not want me to escalate. My orders for escalation do not include the word non-lethal. The communication ended. In the darkness, Zalrin sat in his command chair and wondered how he would explain this to Supreme Chancellor Vexthor. How did you tell the most powerful alliance in the galaxy that they had just attacked the one species they should have left alone? 47 hours later, the Council fleet began its withdrawal. Not a single shot had been fired. Not a single ship had been destroyed. But every being in that vast armada now understood the difference between being peaceful and being harmless. Humanity was peaceful. But they were not, and had never been, harmless. On the Messenger, Captain Jennifer Rodriguez watched the retreating fleet on her displays. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction. She had done her duty, but it brought no joy. She had shown the galaxy a tiny fraction of what humanity was capable of, and it had been enough to end a war before it began. She thought about the weapons they had not needed to use. The ones that existed deeper in the Forbidden Sector, the ones that made the quantum disruptor look gentle by comparison. The weapons that humanity's greatest minds had developed and then locked away, hoping future generations would never need them. Ambassador Webb had been right to read his newspaper. He had known all along that the Council posed no real threat. Not because they were weak, but because humanity had long ago surpassed the kind of power that required armies and fleets. Rodriguez finished her report, logged her actions, and authorized the return of normal power to the Eternal Wrath. Then she set course for her home station, where her wife and daughter were waiting. She had a birthday party to attend, and she had promised to bring her daughter's favorite cake. The monsters had been scared away. Now she could return to the life she had joined the Defense Force to protect. The ordinary, peaceful, beautiful life that humanity had fought so hard to build. And if anyone ever forgot why they should leave humanity alone, well, there were 1,742 other platforms waiting patiently in the darkness, ready to remind them.